One of many issues discussed in Nahjul-Balagha is that Allah is the first and the last, the hidden and the manifest. Of course, like other notions, this too has been deduced from the Holy Quran, although here we are not going to quote the verses of the Holy Quran. Allah is the first, but His precedence is not temporal so as to be in contradiction with His being the last. He is the manifest, but not in the sense of being physically visible or perceptible by the senses. His manifestness does not contradict His hiddenness. In fact, His being the first is identical to His being the last. Similarly, His being manifest and hidden are identical. They are not two different things. Praise be to Allah, for whom one condition does not precede another, so that He may be the first before being the last, or may be manifest before being hidden. Time is not His accomplice, nor does He need the assistance of tools and agents. His being transcends time. His existence transcends nothingness, and His pre-eternity transcends all beginning. The divine essence's transcendence over time, nothingness, beginning, and end is one of the most profound concepts of al-Hikmah philosophy. Allah's pre-eternity does not mean that Allah has always existed. Certainly, Allah has always existed, but the divine pre-eternity is something greater in meaning than existence at all times, because existing at all times assumes existence in time, but Allah's being has not only been at all times, it precedes time itself. This is the meaning of the divine pre-eternity. This shows that His precedence is something other than temporal precedence. Praise be to Allah, whose creation bears testimony to His existence. Temporality of whose creation is the testimony of His pre-eternity. The similarity and likeness among whose creation proves that He is unique. The senses do not perceive Him, and nothing can conceal Him. That is to say, Allah is both hidden and manifest. By Himself He is manifest, but is hidden from, undetectable by, the human senses. His hiddenness from the senses is due to man's own limitations, not because of Him. It needs no proof that existence is synonymous with manifestation. The more powerful the existence of a being, the more manifest it will be. Conversely, the weaker its being is, and the more intermingled with non-being, the less manifest it is to itself and to others. For everything there are two modes of being, its being in itself and its being for others. The being of everything for us depends upon the structure of our senses and on certain special conditions. Accordingly, the manifestation of a thing, a being, is also of two kinds, its manifestation in itself and its manifestation for others. Our senses, on account of their limitations, are able to perceive only a limited number of finite objects possessing the characteristics of similarity and opposition. The senses can perceive colors, shapes, sounds, etc., which are limited temporally and specifically. That is, their existence is confined within a particular time and place. Now, if there existed a uniform light, always and everywhere, it would not be perceptible. A continuous, monotonous sound heard always, constantly, and everywhere, it would not be audible.
The being of Allah, the absolute being and the absolute reality, is not confined to any particular time or place and is hidden from our senses. But Allah in Himself is absolutely manifest. The perfection of His manifestness, which follows from the perfection of His being, is itself the cause of His hiddenness from our senses. The two aspects of His manifestness and hiddenness are one and the same in His essence. He is hidden because He is perfectly manifest, and this perfect manifestness conceals Him. You are hidden on account of your perfect brilliance. You are the manifest, the hidden in your manifestness. The veil on your face is also yours. So manifest you are, your manifestness conceals you from the world's eyes. An appraisal, however brief, of the approach of Nahjul-Balagha and its comparison with that of other schools of thought is essential for discovering the true worth of its views on the problems of theology. We shall confine ourselves to the brief, though not quite sufficient, examples quoted in the foregoing pages, and proceed to evaluate them. The subject of the divine essence and attributes is one which has been discussed a lot by the ancient and modern philosophers, mystics and Sufis of the East and of the West. But in general, their method and approach is totally different from that of Nahjul-Balagha, whose approach is highly original and unprecedented. Only in the Holy Quran can a precedent for Nahjul-Balagha be found. Apart from the Holy Quran, we do not find any other source that provides some ground for the discourses of Nahjul-Balagha. As pointed out earlier, some scholars, because of their failure to trace back to some earlier source the notions elaborated in Nahjul-Balagha, have questioned the authenticity of ascription of these discourses to Imam Ali. They have suggested that these discourses appeared in a later period, after the appearance of the Mutalites and the assimilation of the Greek ideology, heedless of the following saying: "The mean earth with the sublime heaven does not compare." How ignorant it is to compare the Mutalite and the Greek ideologies with the teachings of Nahjul-Balagha.
While ascribing all the attributes of perfection to Allah, the Exalted One, Nahjul-Balagha negates any separation of these attributes from His essence and does not consider them as an appendage of the divine essence. On the other hand, the Ash'arites, as we know, consider the divine attributes to be additional to the essence, so the Mutazilites negate all attributes. An Ash'arite believes in the separation of the attributes from the essence. A Mutazilite speaks of subservience of the attributes to the essence. This has led some people to imagine that the discourses found in Nahjul-Balagha on this topic are fabrications of a later period, under the influence of Mutazilite views, whereas anyone with some insight can readily perceive that the attributes negated by Nahjul-Balagha with respect to the divine essence are qualities of imperfection and limitation. The divine essence, being infinite and limitless, necessitates identity of the attributes with the essence, not negation of the attributes as professed by the Mutazilites. Had the Mutazilites reached such a notion, they would never have negated the divine attributes, considering them subservient to the essence. The same is true of the views on the creation or temporality of the Holy Quran in Sermon 184. One may imagine that these passages of Nahjul-Balagha relate to the latter heated controversies among the Islamic theologians regarding the eternity or temporality of the Holy Quran, and which might have been added to Nahjul-Balagha during the latter centuries. However, a little reflection will reveal that the discourses of Nahjul-Balagha relevant to this issue have nothing to do with the debate on the Holy Quran being either created or uncreated, which was a meaningless controversy, but relevant to the creative command and to the will of the Almighty. Imam Ali says that Allah's will and command represent the divine acts, and therefore are posterior to the essence. For if the command and the will were co-eternal and identical with His essence, they will have necessarily to be considered His associates and equals. Imam Ali says the following: "When He decrees the creation of a thing, He says to it, 'Be,' and it assumes existence, but not through an audible voice which strikes the ear or a cry that can be heard. Indeed, the speech of Allah, glory be to Him, is but His created act, which did not exist before it came into existence. Had it, the divine speech, been itself eternal, it would be another God besides Him." In addition, there are other Musnad traditions on this subject related from Imam Ali, only some of which have been collected in Nahjul-Balagha and can be traced back to his time. On this basis, there is no room for doubting their genuineness. If any superficial resemblance is observed between the statements made by Imam Ali and some views held by the Mutazites, the probability to be allowed in this connection is that some of his ideas were adopted by the Mutazites. The turning point in understanding the profound uniqueness of Nahjul-Balagha's theological approach comes when we recognize the stark contrast between its teachings and those of the various schools of Islamic theology that emerged later. Imam Ali's discussions on the divine essence and attributes were delivered on the minbar of Kufa long before the Mutazilite and Asharite schools were even formed. He spoke with the authority of one who had been nourished by the divine light of the Quran and the teachings of the Prophet. His words were not the product of philosophical speculation or theological debate. They were the fruits of a soul that had reached the highest levels of spiritual attainment. When he spoke of Allah being the first and the last, the manifest and the hidden, he was not engaging in abstract philosophical discourse. He was revealing truths that he had experienced in the depths of his being. He was speaking from a place of gnosis, not merely from a place of intellectual inquiry. The concept that Allah's pre-eternity is not temporal but precedes time itself is a profound insight that sets Nahjul-Balagha apart from all other theological works. Imam Ali did not simply say that Allah has always existed. He went further and said that Allah's existence transcends the very concept of time. Time itself is a creation of Allah, and Allah is not bound by it. This is why His being the first does not contradict His being the last. His firstness and lastness are not two different conditions that exist in time. They are identical aspects of His eternal and absolute reality. Similarly, his manifestness and hiddenness are not two different things. He is hidden because he is perfectly manifest. The perfection of his manifestation is the cause of his hiddenness from our senses. This is a paradox that can only be understood by those who have attained a certain level of spiritual insight. The idea that a uniform light, always and everywhere present, would not be perceptible is a powerful analogy that Imam Ali uses to explain why Allah is hidden from us. Our senses are limited and can only perceive things that are finite and temporal. They can perceive colors, shapes, and sounds that are confined within particular times and places. But the being of Allah is absolute and infinite, not confined to any time or place. Therefore, it is beyond the reach of our senses. This is not because Allah is hidden in the sense of being absent or distant. He is the most manifest of all things, but his manifestation is so perfect and complete that it conceals him from our limited perception. This is the meaning of the beautiful words, "You are hidden on account of your perfect brilliance. You are the manifest, the hidden in your manifestation. The veil on your face is also yours. So manifest you are, your manifestation conceals you from the world's eyes."
This understanding of the divine essence and attributes is not found in any other school of thought. The Ash'arites, who came later, considered the divine attributes to be additional to the essence. They believe that Allah has attributes that are separate from his essence. This leads to a form of multiplicity in the Godhead, which is incompatible with the absolute simplicity that Imam Ali teaches. The Mu'tazilites, on the other hand, negated all attributes, considering them subservient to the essence. They were so concerned with avoiding multiplicity that they ended up negating the very attributes that the Quran ascribes to Allah. Imam Ali's teaching transcends both of these positions. He affirms all the attributes of perfection that the Quran ascribes to Allah, but he negates any separation of these attributes from his essence. He teaches that the attributes are identical with the essence, not additional to it, and not separate from it. This is the position of absolute simplicity, which is the only position that does justice to the infinite and limitless nature of the divine essence. The same is true of Imam Ali's teachings on the creative command and the will of Allah. When he says that Allah's will and command represent the divine acts and are posterior to the essence, he is not engaging in the debate about whether the Quran is created or uncreated. He is speaking about the nature of creation itself. He is saying that Allah's speech is his creative act, which did not exist before it came into existence. If the divine speech were itself eternal and identical with his essence, it would be another God besides him. This is a profound insight that sets Nahjul-Balagha apart from the later theological debates. Some scholars, because of their failure to trace back to some earlier source the notions elaborated in Nahjul-Balagha, have questioned the authenticity of these discourses. They have suggested that these discourses appeared in a later period under the influence of the Mu'tazilites or the Greek philosophers. This is a sign of their ignorance. They are like a person who sees the sun and wonders where it got its light. The teachings of Nahjul-Balagha are not derived from any human source. They are derived from the Quran and from the divine inspiration that flowed through Imam Ali. The Mu'tazilites and the Greek philosophers may have said some things that superficially resemble what Imam Ali said, but the resemblance is only superficial. The depth and the originality of Imam Ali's teachings are unparalleled.
This is why it is essential that we do not compare Nahjul-Balagha with other schools of thought. As the saying goes, the mean earth with the sublime heaven does not compare. To compare the Mu'tazilite and the Greek ideologies with the teachings of Nahjul-Balagha is to compare the earth to the heavens. It is to miss the fundamental difference between the two. The teachings of Nahjul-Balagha are not the product of human speculation. They are the fruits of divine inspiration. They are the expressions of a soul that has reached the highest levels of spiritual attainment. They are the words of a man who was nourished by the Quran and who lived its teachings in every aspect of his life. The controversies of the Muslim theologians, both the Shia and the Sunni, the Ash'arites as well as the Mu'tazilites, generally revolved around the doctrine of rational basis of ethical judgment concerning good and evil. This doctrine, a practical principle operating in the human society, is considered by the theologians to be also applicable to the divine sphere and govern the laws of creation. But we find no trace of it in Nahjul-Balagha. Similarly, there is no sign of it in the Holy Quran. Had the ideas and beliefs of the theologians found their way into Nahjul-Balagha, first of all, the traces of this doctrine should have been found in that book. The fact that it is absent is a testimony to the purity and originality of Nahjul-Balagha's teachings. This is the legacy that we have inherited from Imam Ali. It is a legacy of profound theological insight, of spiritual depth, of intellectual originality. It is a legacy that has the power to guide us through the complexities of our own time. It is a legacy that calls us to rise above the petty controversies that have divided the Islamic world, and to return to the pure teachings of the Quran and the al-Bayt. The teachings of Nahjul-Balagha on the divine essence and attributes are not mere theological speculations. They are the foundations of a worldview that is profoundly Islamic, deeply rational, and spiritually transformative. They invite us to transcend the limitations of our own understanding and to approach the divine with humility and awe. May Allah grant us the wisdom to understand the teachings of Nahjul-Balagha and the strength to live by them. May He guide us to fulfill our duty to Imam Ali by studying his intellectual legacy and making it known to others. May He forgive us for our neglect and help us to turn to this great book with the seriousness and devotion that it deserves. Ameen.